All right, so I was just kind of scrolling YouTube and I came across this video. Obviously, it was in a different language. If you're paying attention, it says auto dubbed at the bottom there. It's called The American Plan to Divide Europe. I don't know if I would call it America attempting to divide Europe. I think it's more America just saying, hey, you guys got issues, fix it. And look, by the way, we got plenty of issues at home in America. That's why, like, my fundamental opinion is that I wish America did prioritize itself a little bit, or at least just take care of its citizens before we do all the wars and we go around and try to put our nose in business that we probably shouldn't have. But because of our relationship with the European Union and NATO and all that, we obviously do have a little bit of an interest in Europe, especially because for at least the last, we'll say, since World War II, for sure after World War II, so the last, like, what, 80 something years, 85 years, the United States and Europe have been pretty much, you know, locked up together. I mean, we've been doing everything trade-wise, from foreign policy, from international law. Like, we've worked with Europe a lot. So there is this interest that we do have in Europe. And plus, we got all the business interest in Europe. So I am curious to hear this perspective. I believe this gentleman is Polish, if I'm not mistaken. Here, I could play a few seconds of, so we can hear the original.
Czy Stany Zjednoczone Donalda Trumpa będą dążyły do rozbicia i zniszczenia
Don't get me wrong, I'm sure he's saying a lot of great things. I just want to hear the language. So I just wanted to show you guys just the comparison of the dubbed version versus not.
Will Donald Trump's United States seek to dismantle and destroy the European Union?
Isn't that cool? I don't know. I think it's cool.
Such a question would sound...
Actually, no, I think it's funny how the timing of that. Do you think Donald Trump's America would destroy Europe? And I'm just like, do you think that's cool? And my comment to that's cool is more for the dubbed version. But yeah, I guess we'll get into why Donald Trump's about to destroy Europe.
far-fetched not long ago. Even considering this administration's attitude toward Europe, and even considering the very dynamic American moves aimed at rebuilding the international order, such a stance would be far too radical. Yet, systemic changes are constantly accelerating, and today it's worth asking not only whether, but also why and how. I cordially invite you to watch this episode.
And I guess I'm about to watch, right? A little bit of an American and Polish,
XTB
right?
is
We're
the
talking
partner of
about
this
this. We're
episode.
seeing what's up.
The year is coming to an end, so it's the perfect time to use your annual IC and XCE limits and do something good for your financial future. What's more, if you're looking for a gift idea, XTB has something special for you.
I have no
This
idea
holiday
if this would
season,
work in
You can
America.
gift your loved ones shares through the XTB app.
Doesn't look
These
like
could be
it.
shares in a company you love, or perhaps the beginning of long-term savings for your shared future. You'll find
You guys should
details in
invest,
the
though.
description.
That's
And
the
remember,
overall
when
message of
registering,
this.
Enter the code Politica Graniczna Foreign Policy. If you
Good.
want to expand your
The second you
investing
turn
knowledge,
18,
I
start
think we should
investing.
start with a brief return to the text of the American National Security Strategy. It reads that Europe is heading towards civilizational collapse, and in the next sentence, Americans identify the European Union as the cause of this state of affairs.
No lies detected? I'm just trying to understand where in that it's wrong. In the way, and I think he's alluding to more of what recently came out about I believe a week ago. The White House posted an official stat, and I can maybe try pulling it up here on the side when the video's playing. But the White House did post an official stat of the population replacement numbers, the immigration numbers, and how bad it is over there in Europe. And it is pretty alarming to see it. And kind of, yeah, they were right. Within the next 20, I mean, again, you're looking at some of these countries have maybe, I don't know, 8% foreign born versus some of them may have up to 15% and a little bit more. And right now in the current time period where you're like, oh, well, I look around me and everything's fine, everything's peaceful, nothing matters. And then in 20 years when, the foreign borns, then they have kids and then they have kids, and then you'll see how it works. Because you'll see there'll be, they usually, genuinely, I mean, I think the population birth rate on average for most European countries is around 1.3, 1.4, and I think the immigrant is, if I'm not, somewhere above 2. I think, to be honest, some of them, depending on what country, if it's like Muslim or not, I mean, they could be anywhere up to 5 to 6 kids per family. So when you're looking at those from more of a number standpoint, yeah, the United States is 100% right. And we do have an interest in this because of our long-standing relationship with Europe and also our histories. I mean, a bunch of European settlers came over to America and created one of the biggest and best countries in the world. So we our history and what we do is very tied in. I mean, the Magna Carta over in England, that inspires a lot of what the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are. Without the Magna Carta, without what they did over there, we wouldn't have our rules. Without England's court system and them setting up through all the process, we wouldn't have our court system here. So that's why we do kind of have a little bit of a vested interest in Europe and what Europe's doing.
Then,
But yeah, no lies detected here.
we read that America will work to rebuild civilizational self-confidence in Europe by cultivating resistance to the continent's current trajectory in individual countries. This refers to the healthy nations of Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe. And today, from media reports, we know that in other versions of this document, Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Poland were mentioned in this context. In other words, the official document, which is supposed to outline the fundamental principles of American foreign policy, directly portrays the European Union as a political adversary leading Europe to its downfall, and America, after all, does not want Europe to fall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair complaint. Again, when you look at what the European Union is doing with all the... look, I'll say it like this. There's some things I like about them. Like, I do think they're ahead. Typically on consumer protections, I feel like the European Union is miles ahead of the United States in some areas. I was jealous. You guys had Fortnite on Epic Game Store way before we were able to do that stuff. That's what I mean. When it comes to some of their consumer protections and stuff like that, obviously I think they do really well over there. But my God, the amount of spying they want to do is I mean, look, the United States, we spy on our own citizens, with the National Security Act. We need to repeal that first and foremost. So I'm going to call a spade a spade. We ain't perfect. The CIA and the FBI have done countless examples of that, and you can just go Google, and I think there's a good we can maybe watch a few of his videos sometime, but there's a really good YouTube channel that does and all these custom animations with that. But we've had our fair share of bullshit. But I mean, my God, the European Union, with the now that they're going after X, right? They're trying to find Elon Musk. I believe they actually tied it into where they're suing, or they're finding him specifically, not just like the company. So that's some of these. I believe in the European Union Charter, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in their documents, it says that a population cannot be replaced, right? Like the European Union, in theory, is responsible for protecting these European countries, right? It's a little bit of like the United States in a lot of ways. I mean, we're obviously very different in how we organize. We're more of a united country. You guys are individual countries united over one banner. But ultimately, that European Union is supposed to act in the best interest of those countries. And is it really the best interest of those companies to be bringing over massive amounts of the third world? No. It's benefiting nobody. And obviously, guys, there's something good about immigration when it's with checks and balance, first and foremost.
History is truly incredibly perverse. After all, American actions were one of the most important catalysts for the eventual functioning of European integration.
That's true.
And we, here on the Foreign Policy Channel, discussed together whether the European Union would survive without Americans 7 years ago, which is incredible. It's incredible that our adventure has lasted so long, and it's also incredible that it's certainly in a clumsy form, because looking back on ourselves 7 years ago is a very painful experience. But in terms of substance,
very different.
These considerations remain absolutely relevant, because America contributed significantly to the emergence of European integration. America needed a market for its booming industrial base after World War II. But I don't want to delve too deeply into history today, as we've discussed these themes many times before. Today, let's consider, above all, why Americans would want to harm European integration at all. This approach, emerging from American strategy, is clearly based on the very old Roman principle of divide and conquer. It's incredible how effective this is, as I'll discuss at the very end. I know this thread may sound rather abstract at first, but I think it's fundamental, crucial to understanding this topic, at least in my opinion, because the divide...
He's not wrong. I guess he's going to dive into here the divide and conquer comment in a little bit. But he's not wrong in the sense of how America views itself or how we really should be viewing ourselves. Because at the end of the day, we are the world superpower. We are the biggest and baddest country. People wonder why, like, when I know there's a lot of people who accuse George Bush of committing war crimes, and maybe to an extent he did. But you'll never see a United States president go away for war crimes. Why? Because we're the biggest country. Simple. When you got the most guns, like there's a reason why we spend $1 trillion. I think they just raised it to $1 trillion on the military budget. Like there's a reason why we do that. And I'm not saying that's right, but what I'm saying is we are the biggest country. And when you are the biggest country, especially after the fall of the Soviets, Russia obviously came back and China is a whole different conversation now. China was always inevitable that they were going to become like, a competitive power just because of their population and when all the investments in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. Well, if you don't talk about the famine, but overall, like they were planned. Like this was good. It was expected for China to eventually be competitive. But yeah, after the fall of the Soviets, we pretty much had like a vacuum of like no one else is there. We can do what we want, when we want, and how we want. No one's threatening us. Like America was constantly in this war phase for at least 80 years minimum. So now in the one time period where the United States hasn't kind of been in a war, it's kind of been, meddling in other countries' politics. And we've all done that. Every world power has done that to one extent. But he's right in the sense that we are like, I don't want to say the modern day Roman Empire, but in a lot of ways we kind of are. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, just what our position is right now. It's how great our country is that the fact that we are there. So yes, we can kind of tell Europe a little bit, hey, this is what's happening, this is what isn't happening. Now, I'm not saying that we can tell them what to do, they're their own countries. But at the same time, when we have a vested interest in Europe, financially, militarily, or whatever, we can kind of drop our opinions if we want to, especially about this, especially when we're noticing a total change in Europe that, again, some people realize it, others don't. And that's why this issue can't get fixed right now, is because there's a lot of people where it's not happening at their front door, so if they don't see it, they won't believe it. Plain and simple.
Principle was often used by the most powerful participant in a given system to create balance by often pitting them against each other or playing on the differences between other participants in a given international system. This, one might say, was the basis of the Anglo-Saxon strategic approach towards continental Europe. It's a kind of default position. This is how the British operated, always supporting a balance of power that didn't lead to hegemony on the continent. The Anglo-Saxons wouldn't want the continent to unite because such a continent might be too powerful. They didn't want hegemony on the European continent. And European integration could be tolerated from the perspective of an external maritime power. It could even be beneficial when, in the first phase, it created markets for the booming American industrial base after World War II, and in the second phase, when European integration, through Americans de facto exercising supreme power over the entire international system by regulating norms, through international institutions, through the...
I hope he mentions the fact that Europe also sold its fucking like industrial complex to everyone else. Like, Europe used to be a main manufacturing hub. They used to be a main producer in a lot of ways. Countries pretty much turned into a consumer base, which is what the United States is, but we still got a lot of manufacturing. We just sent ours a lot to China. Actively, we're trying to fix that. I don't believe that it will ever return to what the former industrial complex was, but we can at least become competitive again back in that industry. But, I mean, Europe's, like, if you look at their big corporations and what they're doing, I mean, all the top 10 organizations or corporations that are, I guess, the most successful ones, majority of them are in the United States, if not all of them. Microsoft, Tesla, Apple, Amazon, etc. So yeah, we do have a financial and economic influence over the world purely based on how big and massive our companies are. We've just been better for business over the last 60 years versus Europe. Europe has done so many regulations, right, with the European Union. They've done so many regulations and everything to restrict a lot of key industries. So in a lot of ways that Europe, I don't know if he's going to bring that up, but Europe did sell its manufacturing out. Like, they did just sell everything out. They stopped doing it. Look at all their green initiatives and all the energy crisis like that Germany's currently dealing with. So yeah, it's really messed up on the over regulations in Europe, which again, I do believe in regulations, so I don't want to sound like I don't. But there is something to say that when you go too far, like you don't want to kill off industries. And that's what California is doing right now with the gasoline.
Entire set of tools we know from our
And
lives
that's
and from
that could be a
recent
topic
years,
for a different
known from the
conversation.
past, when Americans constituted the superior element of the international system. European integration was, in fact, an extension of the expansion of the American sphere of influence. Yes, that means through European integration, American systemic norms were also expanded. And now, when America is changing its attitude towards the international system, that is, it no longer wants to be a systemic power, but simply wants to be one of the key players on the planet, playing by the typical rules of the great power game, the situation changes. Once again, we return to the attempt to balance power. And from this perspective, European integration ceases to be beneficial and becomes something perhaps even dangerous in the long run, because integration doesn't expand the United States' influence, but can limit it. It's much easier to manage the European continent, its relations with Russia, its economic conditions, and its technologies, if you're dealing with a divided continent.
He's right there. I'm not going to sit there and say the way he's again. We're to let him explain it too. I don't know how he's kind of framing it in a way. It's like we're breaking up the European Union so they won't be able to work together. Well, yeah, I'm not going to deny there could be definitely be an interest there. I'm going to lean on the fact more of that we want Europe to wake up to the fact that you guys got some issues. Like you're not defending your own continent. You're not defending your countries. Only you're fining, I believe, Hungary $1 million a day or something like that because they refuse immigration. You guys will fight Poland on their immigration policies because they don't want to accept immigration. You're going to actively go after parties in political elections and pretty much say, "Oh, you can't have a this person didn't win." They tried doing that in France. I believe they did that in Romania or one of those countries. The Conservative Party won, and they said, "Oh, this is not a real election." So yeah, they're currently meddling in also politics of these countries as well. So yeah, maybe we can across the pond. We're sitting here going, yeah, "Is this really beneficial for you guys?" Because we have NATO. So maybe if the European Union disappears, we're still going to be in NATO, right? And until further notice, until we're out of that, you never know what can happen tomorrow. Maybe Trump announces we leave NATO. Who knows? But at the same time, there's definitely yeah, I can't deny the fact that there's maybe a personal interest in seeing a broken Europe. But I also do think in a lot of ways a broken, not having the European Union, what have they benefited them for? What have they really done other than just completely cause problems and every single country has to listen to Brussels? Is that really, where's the self-governance there? There's not. You got the European Union just forcing these countries to you have to listen to us, you have to do this. They're like an authoritarian as well. Just all dressed up in bureaucracy. It's no different.
Therefore, we return to the logic of divide and conquer. America needs Europe in international affairs, but not necessarily Europe as a united entity. It's worth noting here that the fact that an era is ending and we're returning to the search for some kind of balance of power, a balance of power, is again explicitly stated in the American security strategy. So I'm not trying to force anything here. I'm trying to understand the sources of reasoning stemming from the strategy of the most powerful power on Earth today. I hope I've managed to present you with this broad American perspective, but this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. There is a significant temptation to enter here, and what does it look like from a European perspective? But this is one of the many problems in the current situation. There's no such thing as a European perspective. There are many, many perspectives. Different European capitals have different perspectives, so if something like that is worth discussing in a completely separate article. And by the way, of course, don't forget that it's worth buying coffee. It's worth buying coffee from GBS for the holidays. I think a 20% discount and free shipping is a really good deal, as Donald Trump would say. In my opinion, Arabica beans are truly top-notch.
It's funny.
Now let's move on to the trade dimension. The European Union is the vehicle through which Europeans have connected
Something's not right about this map. That's supposed to say Gulf of America.
themselves to a system that, while having the US dollar at its heart, is also based on the US trade deficit. This is worth repeating constantly. In goods trade, the European Union has a massive trade surplus with America. In 2024, before Eurostat, it was almost 200 billion euros. Almost 21% of European exports go to America. The next country on the list, the United Kingdom, is only 13th. The situation changes when we also consider services, which also means digital goods. Here, the Americans are extracting digital extortion from us at every turn, but even taking this dimension into account,
Yeah, I can't deny that we do data collect. I mean, come on, our American companies, they data collect on all of us. We should probably have some rules and regulations. See, that's where I see rules and regulations being like good, and that's what the European Union has generally done. They're better with consumer protections, to be honest with you.
Europe
I'm trying to remember if I can off the top of my head, but there was a really other than the Fortnite one, there was another example too.
has a trade surplus
Brain
of around
farting.
50 billion euros overall. When the Americans state quite openly that, from their perspective, the fundamental step towards restructuring the international order will be ending the status of a country with an international trade deficit, it becomes entirely natural to attack those who have surpluses with America, and the European Union is one of them.
Well, yeah, because we look over at the European Union and said, okay, their entire economies have been held up by pretty much tariffing us. I mean, obviously that's generalizing and probably oversimplifying it, but yeah, a lot of these countries have kept their industries alive mainly on the fact that they don't let American companies go in there and compete against them. All of their European companies are more than welcome to come over to our economy, invest in our companies, buy everything up, affect our industry, affect our manufacturing, but our companies can't over there and do that. We can't go over there and do that. For example, do you ever hear of like the chicken wars? I believe this was between the United States and Germany. We there was like they taxed our like I'm trying to remember the exact details, but I believe it's like they taxed our trucks, the American like the pickup trucks, and then so we taxed like their chicken exports, and it just became this whole thing where pretty much for like the last like 30 years, 40 years, or whatever it was. I think maybe it could have been longer since like the late 60s, 60 years. Um, but whatever it was, we've had like pretty much like a tariff on like Germany's, or they've had a tariff on our exports. I don't remember the exact details of it, but like I think it's called like the chicken wars or something like that if you guys want to look it up. But yeah, we've pretty much held like they just been tariffing us. They've been going after our economy. So we're looking at this going, yeah, we need an eye for an eye. Now, there's still I guess debate of the tariffs are working or not. Our inflation's gone up a little bit. Again, I don't. Inflation's such a weird number to mess with. Like I don't really know, right? I think it's so early to tell. Like maybe by the a little bit in the Trump second year, we can probably gauge more. Like I would honestly believe, based on if you look at how the economy has, if you take out the big seven companies, the economy hasn't grown at all. We've seen a record job loss. We see cancellation of certain industries, which part of that it's due to AI, which I honestly believe if regardless if it was Trump or Kamala, I think they would have been dealing with that same issue. I think with the way AI is, like this isn't a bubble, this is a thing that we're dealing with. So again, when you're taking all that into account and Trump's going in there trying to balance the books, and then he sees that, India's taxing the crap out of us, the European Union is taxing the crap out of us, and yeah, if these countries can work with us here, I think in an ideal world we can have zero. No tariffs across the board, free trade amongst everyone, but how many of these European economies would collapse? How many of the certain economies in India would collapse because some of their industries would literally die overnight if American competitiveness can go in? So
The manner in which the trade agreement between the United States and the European Union was adopted is humiliating for Europe, with its asymmetric tariffs and bizarre provisions. For example, it stipulates that private European companies will invest $600 billion in the United States by 2028. The mystery is how to enforce such provisions. But in any case, it seems perfectly obvious to me that when the Americans
if you want our military, you pay it. Like that's not me declaring war or anything like that, but that's just if you want us to pony up and help you guys out when you need it and be this big bad wolf for Russia, then yeah, you just pay the deal. That's how it's enforced.
have a block of 450 million wealthy consumers on the other side, when they have a powerful economy, because the European Union is a powerful economy, Europe's relative importance is declining. There's a
He's
lot
right
of
about
talk
that.
about Europe's crisis, and much of this is, of course, good and correct, but it doesn't change the fact that Europe is an economic powerhouse. Europe produces more steel than the United States, Europe exports more than the United States, and so on and so forth. In any case, it's obvious that negotiating with such a broad bloc is much more difficult than breaking up that bloc and taking it out. Also, reducing trade policy by tempting it with preferential treatment and reducing it to bilateral relations, which allows for trade matters to be handled much more easily. One might not like the European bureaucracy's legislative diarrhea, its overwhelming desire to regulate absolutely everything. I understand that. Besides, it's become obvious to the European Union itself that it is overregulated.
That's the main reason why we don't like it. Right there. He just said it. Overregulation. Like, there's a time and a place for it, but that's the main reason why we don't like it. Not to try to do this political because like we would rather. I don't think it's a bad thing for the European Union to be together, but their bureaucracy is killing them, and it doesn't help that you got these individual individual countries, not doing any help to benefit their citizens either, taxing them more, hurting. Like I know the UK is dealing with an inheritance tax with farmers, which you got pretty much farmers deciding if they, I believe, if they should end themselves before, I believe it's like April 1st or something like that. Because if they, pretty much what happens is if they somehow die before that date, then they wouldn't have to pay their kids wouldn't have to pay an inheritance tax. Well, if it's after that date, then they would have to pay a crap ton of money in it. So you got farmers having to make a sad ethical decision there, because of stupid government policy. Now, that's not the European Union's fault. That's just an example of how fucked up bureaucracy is in general. Because it doesn't matter how many people can tell Keir Starmer that, hey, this is a stupid idea. He's somehow going to still do it. Same thing as half the issues here in America. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans, the American people can look at them and say, this is stupid. Stop doing it. They don't care. They won't listen. They'll listen to their private people, their APAC guy, whatever you want to call it. They'll listen to them. They won't listen to us. So yeah, in a way, bureaucracy is killing us. In some ways.
I mean, deregulation was definitely one of the buzzwords of the year in European politics. But at the same time, it's impossible to deny the effectiveness of this European legislation in exerting pressure on external corporations.
I guess he's right, yeah. The European Union exported about $2.8 trillion worth of goods, which is significantly more than the U.S. exports about $2.1 trillion. Okay, but take that into account. We are one country. They are multiple countries, but that's still impressive. I'll give the nod where the nod's due.
Including American ones. Apple and the USB-C in iPhones are examples. There are examples of meth regulations, or the disputes over sweetener, or now X. And from the perspective of American corporations, this must be incredibly irritating. The fact that there's an external body that's such a significant market for American corporations that it dictates certain terms, and these American corporations are forced to comply, whether they like it or not, one way or another.
Which I like that. I see, and that's where I do like the European Union. Because in a lot of ways, they've helped by them with their laws and their protections. We've seen some hand in hand, where something happens over there, helps us out over here. So that's where I in some ways, I do agree with the European Union. I do believe they do good in some areas. Some areas.
This frustration is clearly growing, as Europeans are also regulating areas in which they themselves are not particularly proficient, from AI to digital platforms, and these are largely American corporations.
Europe doesn't produce anything.
That's why, from the perspective of these American corporations, it's crucial to eliminate Europe's ability to regulate the activities of American big tech at a central level. Without regulation at the European level, Europe can only deepen its status as a techno-feudal powerhouse for American big tech. There's really no other way, because it's difficult to expect that countries whose GDP is a fraction of the value of corporations like Google or Meta will have any kind of competition, any chance.
I mean, that's the biggest difference. Like one American corporation is literally bigger than an entire country's GDP. If that doesn't show where the shift is, like Europe used to be the main producer, the main dominant factor of the entire world. For hundreds of years, they've held that title. They don't have that title anymore. The United States does that. Now, that's where I understand where if the United States, we can kind of go around and say, you got to do this, you got to do that. But he's right in the sense that if the European Union's together, there could be a little bit more of a fight between us. So
of
I can
competing
definitely
with
see
these
that.
corporations.
Or see the angle on why the United States
If we
not
in
wanting
Europe
it
fail to
is good.
regulate the activities of American big tech, which touch absolutely every aspect of our lives, not because we don't want to, but because we practically can't, then we will be neither a sovereign state nor a continent. Our dependence on American digital service providers is already absolutely massive, and this will only grow over time if nothing changes. Americans de facto control the flow of information on our continent to a significant extent. We don't portray it that way, because it's all wrapped up in this sugary set of slogans. We think it's built on freedom of speech, on certain values. You know how it works in practice.
Well, it is because we don't have people going away for tweeting out against their government. I believe that there was a case the other day that a guy went away for 15 months in the United Kingdom for a tweet. So, I mean, yeah, like a lot of our platforms are fundamentally based on our First Amendment protection, which you guys do benefit from. I mean, Brazil tried finding X. I don't know what other. There's a few other countries that try to find X that didn't work. Partially because they're an American-based company, so it's like, yeah, are you gonna try to convince us to force them to pay you guys? No. Some of these fines and regulations are just ways for these governments, or in this case, Brussels, to have a control to be in control. I mean, let's not act like there's not the European Union doesn't want to potentially one up the United States in a lot of ways. And that's where the United States has to be careful in how we do these relationships with these countries. Because we pretty much didn't do anything. Like in the 90s and stuff, we had the opportunity to, once the Soviet Union fell, we had the opportunity to pretty much take America from here and go here. And in a lot of ways, we did hit those milestones, but the people don't feel that. The people are still suffering. So if everyone else feels poorer now than they did 5 years ago, is that really like, how did America help? What did we do? Well, we've been too busy dealing with foreign policy and all these foreign wars and all these, 9/11 and attacking Afghanistan and all that stuff. So we've just gotten our hands involved in too many things where we've, as Americans or as our government, has forgotten really where its priorities should be. And we were too busy for 70 years going after Russia, dealing with Russia and the Soviets because we didn't want them to conquer half of Europe. And so it just goes back and forth with how countries and stuff do these things. And yeah, we've had one way for 70 years, 80 years. We've had this globalism, all these corporations and nonprofits all working together. We're seeing changes. We're seeing now we have enough data and we have enough resources to go, is this not a good thing? Is this a good thing? Should we keep this? Should we not keep this? Like, these are the questions that we're getting now. We're wondering if these organizations, and in this case the European Union, are they effective? Are they actually benefiting the people? Are they protecting their countries? Well, from the United States perspective, is no, they're not. Mainly because we're looking at their immigration, and we're looking at how much of a joke that is. You can't even recognize parts of France anymore. You can't even recognize parts of the fact that in the German Christmas market they got to cover up and have like road blockers so there's not another accident, or I say accident, another terrorist attack, whatever you want to call that. That's sad. Europe never had to deal with those issues. Not even like 10 years ago they didn't even have to deal with that crap. It's gotten exponentially worse over the last 5 years for some reason. And that's where the European Union's mainly failing, is that they're not protecting their country or the countries they're representing at all. Or the citizens of those countries, is a better way to say
In practice,
it.
it looks like this. If a topic is raised on this platform that the algorithm doesn't approve of, not only can the reach of that particular video but also the channel in general be drastically and permanently reduced.
He's 100% right on that. I even feel like with my post that X fluctuates it. I mean, I can have a post on X where it can get a few thousand views, and then I can have a similar post or something along the lines of a similar topic, and I'll get like 30. So yeah, I agree with him there with some of these algorithms, and we don't really know how manipulative these algorithms are. We really don't.
That's how it works in practice. What's even more perverse is that Americans are parading freedom of speech in this battle. Any attempt to regulate American big tech is, from the American perspective, an attack on freedom of speech.
Well, it is though. I mean, it is attack on free speech. Like I said, you got people you cannot speak out against certain things. Now, there's one in America. There's things we can't speak out against, specifically referring to one country in particular. But that being said, you guys can't even talk about. You can't even criticize. You got people in Germany who they criticize. The one girl who just fled Germany because she's done nothing but criticize the government and how it hasn't been fair, and it designated their conservative party as this, I don't want to say terrorist group or domestic terrorist group or something along the lines that gives pretty much the rights of the opposition parties to pretty much look at the finances and look at the back files and look at all their information. Is that really fair? So yeah, like we do have this gut reaction that when there is regulation on some of our big tech, that this is an attack on free speech. Because Americans, we view this issue, I think on average, very cut and dry. Like, it's either you do have it, like any limitation, in my opinion, any limitation at all in speech is against freedom of speech. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with what they're saying or you don't. If we try to limit it or try to go after it, it arguably gives them a bigger voice, right? So when everyone else can just cut and dry talk and say whatever you want, yeah, there's more freedoms that way. That's just basic though. Like, yeah, like in some of these countries they do have like a form of freedom of speech, but they don't have it as just cut and dry as we have it. I don't believe in the thing called hate speech. Cuz like you can say something to me that I don't like it, and I can just go, "Oh, well, what you're saying is hate speech." Like when you open up that can of worms on what you can and can't say, that just creates a whole other mess of legislation and issue, and bureaucracy can step in and fluff it up and do whatever they want to do.
Finally, the last argument, the most subjective one, the ideological argument. Opinions can vary widely here. Generally, opinions about how important the sphere of ideas or ideology is to the functioning of the world.
Left and right, yeah.
And these opinions vary widely. For people so deeply involved in one front of the culture war, everything is, to some extent, at least an element of the fight between law and leftism, between godlessness and piety, between capitalism and socialism.
He's right here. He's very right. This is how we get like primitive, bro. This is like where our animal instincts kind of come out. That we want to gravitate towards our echo chambers naturally. That's just what people do. They want people who agree with them and share similar ideas. Not everyone likes to have people that disagree with them, and that's just how it is. So yeah, when you're growing up or when you're engaging in politics, you're going to tend to gear towards people who agree with you. Now, I got plenty of friends that don't agree with me, and they always tell me all the time how much they disagree with me, but we have good debate over it. It also helps me learn and helps them learn. There's a learning curve with having people in your corner or having people around you that do disagree with you, because sometimes they're just going to tell you how it is, or really they literally tell you the exact counter argument that you're kind of like, well, man, how would someone counter this argument, or how would someone say this? Well, when you're having constant discourse with people, yeah, that's how you learn. And that's where it comes back to the Americans, and we believe cold cut and dry what freedom of speech is, and anything that goes after that, we view that as like, whoa, what the fuck? That's why we don't like the European Union meddling in its hands and finding acts. Whether you like Elon or not, that's a whole separate topic for a different day. But the fact is that we don't like how the European Union thinks that they can just sit there and say X is promoting this, X is promoting that, X is going after accounts. Like, what are you talking about? No, you just don't like it how you can't control X. That's why. You don't like it that you can't control Elon Musk and what he does because he lives in a different country, and that drives you guys insane. And that's part of the benefits of being an American, right there.
Depending on which front someone is involved on. On the other hand, for those who don't like being involved in these culture wars, who stay away from them, such people tend to view ideology as nothing more than a thin veil, a narrative veil, behind which the truly important things are hidden.
Mm-hmm. He's right there.
We've known each other for a long time, so you probably know that these two extreme approaches, at least in my opinion, don't adequately explain reality, because this sphere of ideas or ideology is neither the one that determines the rhythm of the world's operations, but it's also not that it is completely meaningless and has no influence on the world's operations at all. And why am I saying this? Because we can observe a growing ideological gap between, at least, the current American administration and the European Union. Yes, well, the Americans wrote in their national security strategy that they have rid the armed forces of the leftist madness of gender ideology. If a European country wrote something like this in its strategy, some rule of law process would definitely begin the very next day, because for the European Union, the principles of diversity, inclusiveness, and so on, are one of its priorities when it comes to further distributing European funds.
Why? Why? Like, look, here's the cut and dry issue with this, right? Like, yeah, is having people who are transgender in the military, yeah, it's more diverse. I don't want them in a situation if they're mentally not 100% with themselves, right? I'm not saying the fact that they're a different gender. I'm just more saying the fact that they like did go through an entire process. They're chemically altered. Everything about them is technically different in some ways. Why do we trust them to be serving in the military? Why do we trust these people to be giving orders in potentially a game time situation where you need like super on depth critical thinking? And I'm not saying these people aren't intelligent or they're not capable or they're not whatever. But if you're not 100%, if you're not 100% honest with yourself, right? If you're not like, yeah, they may be saying, oh, I'm a new gender and I feel great. Well, congratulations. Are you going to be capable if there's something happens in wartime? Are you going to be able to do something about that? So I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily that America looked at its military and said, we can't be doing this. Like, yeah, we can have diversity in other areas, fine. No one's saying that they can't be transgender, but they're saying you can't be transgender and join the military. You're going to be holding a gun, you're going to be in combat, you're going to be in whatever. Now, granted, maybe some of the transgenders were going to like more office-like jobs, but if you're going to be in a chain of command, it's just in that environment, it's just not right. It's not there. It should not. You should not. The military should not be responsible for paying for all these medical treatments and medical crap and making the bill go up there. It's just not like they're paying for your medication. They're paying for your testosterone pills. Like, do you see what all this crap opens up? The military almost loses its focus on what it's actually doing because it's worrying about all this other people to fill the numbers. Well, in America, we don't have to worry about that necessarily. It's a very cut and dry issue. You want people who are more than capable enough to serve the position. That's it. And yeah, we don't need to be hitting diversity quota numbers. You should be going, it's merit time. It's merit based. We're going after people we want people in positions who are qualified, who are mentally 100%. And yeah, if you know your gender, like if you're like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm a guy, 100%, I've always been a guy, then yeah, you're probably more 100% than someone who's kind of hopping between the genders. It's not, sorry, like that's just true. You shouldn't be in combat. You shouldn't be in the military.
Yeah.
That's where liberals, geez. That's where Europe has kind of been chained up with all these stupid ideology and these stupid questions. Americans, we partially woke up to that idea. There's still a lot of people who haven't woken up to that idea. But some of these issues are very just cut and dry on what they are. Sorry, just what it is.
Yes,
Like it or you don't.
The ideological gap seems to be widening. It's very clear. The gap between the current American ruling elites and the elites currently ruling Brussels. And this American attitude toward Europe is often described from a paternalistic perspective, as if Americans don't understand Europe. There are some anecdotes here about Americans not knowing who to call when they want to contact Europe because it's televised. You all know this approach, these stories. But I'm convinced that it's not that the current American ruling elites don't like or understand the European Union, but that they hate the European Union. They hate these elites. When American elites currently speak about European politics, there's a palpable sense of contempt in their speeches. So, from an ideological perspective, these forces are also diverging. And it's no coincidence that the Americans have chosen this very ideological line to divide Europe. All of this is wrapped up in slogans about defending European civilization or defending freedom of speech.
I just think it's interesting that you have Americans care more about defending Europe than Europe does, right? And I think that partially comes down to is that at the end of the day, like I don't have another country to go to. This is it. I only got one country. Now, partially because of how America has always been, we are a country of immigrants, right? We are a country of people coming over and entering through Ellis Island, right? So people who, especially which a lot of Americans, a lot of their lineage really, like my lineage only goes back 3 generations, like early 1900s, and then they eventually capped off Italians and Greeks and said no more can enter in the 1920s. So we, I, I'm still in a lot of ways connected to Italy and Greece because of how close I am. Like, really, if my great grandfather decided one day to sleep in and miss the boat, we're still in Greece. Like my family's still in Italy. But I do have a little bit of an interest in knowing what's going on because, like, at the end of the day, that's where my family comes from. So I do have a curiosity about it. Now, I'm 100% loyal to America. I love my country, and I wouldn't want to really live anywhere else because I'm an American. And that's where it makes me ultimately different at the end of the day is that I'm an American. I'm not Italian. I'm not Greek. I'm American. But if you're looking at my blood, yeah, I do have a little bit of an interest with Rome. I have an interest with Greece. I have an interest with seeing what those countries succeed because I want to see fellow Italians and Greeks succeed. I think that'd be cool, and I would say that for really most of Europe, because of how much we share. Like Americans and the people, we have similar interests with people in the United Kingdom. We share a lot of our shows. We share a lot of our content. A lot of Americans watch professional soccer in Europe, or excuse me, I do call it football, so don't go after me. But they do watch professional football. I'm an Arsenal fan. I know a lot of my buddies are Chelsea fans. One of them is a Newcastle fan. Another one's an Aston Villa fan. So we do kind of share cultures. A lot of UK watch the NFL. So we're going to share a lot, and that's why partially I think it's okay, and that's more of the reason why Americans have an invested interest in it. Part of it is because of who our families are, where we come from, how recent we are here. So, yeah, I do think America we have connections to Europe. A lot of Americans have connections to Europe, and that's just how it is.
But these are
So
all
we're going out and we're seeing Europe being totally different and Europe becoming unrecognizable in a lot of ways. Yeah, that becomes a little alarming for people because that's not what we're expecting. We're expecting we go to Europe. Like if I go to France, I want to see French people. If I go to the United Kingdom, I want to see English people. Or I guess Scottish, Wales, and Northern Irish. If I go to Italy, I want to see Italians. If I go to Germany, I want to see Germans. If I go to Greece, Romania, I don't know, Ukraine, Belarus, Sweden, Norway, etc., right? Like, I want to see those countries for what they are in their cultures. I don't want to go there in 20 years and I'm going to go visit Italy, but now it looks like Sudan. Or now it's, I don't know, what's another country? Iran, but I have no issues with the Iranian people. But you get my point. Like, if I want to go to Iran, I'll go visit Iran. If I want to go to Sudan, I'll go visit Sudan. I don't know why you want to go to Sudan right now, but if I did, that's what I would do. I don't want to go when I go visit Rome. I don't want to not go see Rome for the people. I want to go for the culture. I want to see it all. So yeah,
slogans related precisely to the realm of ideas.
and yeah, Europe, and we're also just telling Europeans to wake up. It's like we're telling you guys that it's okay to be pro your own country, just as much as that's what we're figuring it out over here. Nothing wrong about loving your country and wanting to see your country and the people in your country succeed. And yeah, in England or in Europe, I don't know, I do that, but in Europe, as a whole, there is like yeah, like who because of who you are, right? Yeah, so technically English people are majority white. French people are historically white. Spanish people are a mix, but white nonetheless. Same thing as Italians, same thing as Greeks, same thing as all that. They're technically white, just different shades, right? So that's what Europe is. That's what we're saying is that technically the natural born people, your native citizens, your native population is declining dramatically. That is an issue. The United States, we are currently dealing with that same problem, is that we're not having enough kids we're not population replacing. We're too many deaths, not enough babies. And the answer is not just importing immigration from everywhere else. You have to fix your current system from within. You have to promote family growth, family units, family values. Simple as that. And I don't even believe we're not even doing that the right way. So that's why really at the end of the day we can't call the kettle black. Pot, you know what I mean? Is it pot can't call the kettle black, whatever the term is? Like, we can't really be doing that because in my opinion, we're not helping the at-home body at all. Like, my biggest issue with some of what Donald Trump's been doing is that I think we've been dealing too much with foreign policy. And I knew that that's what we were going to be doing, that we were going to be kind of like, he was really big on foreign policy first term, but I want him to start dealing with the housing crisis. Number one. I want him to start dealing with unemployment and how bad it's becoming. I want him to start dealing with how young people feel like there's genuinely no opportunity or no hope in the world. And that's bad. Those are all bad things that we need to fix that we're not. We got homeless on the street that we're not doing anything about. So when I can look around and see all these problems here, yeah, I don't really want us to deal with European politics. It goes against really what my American first ideas are. But at the same time, as the world superpower, we've put ourselves in that position where we kind of have to in some ways. Because we don't want to see Europe fall. We don't want to see Europe getting replaced. We want to see Europe for who they are. We want to go to Europe for Europe. Simple.
Is an ideology. And when we add to this the clearly growing wave of support in Europe for anti-establishment parties, primarily right-wing ones, though not exclusively, which is manifested firstly, of course, in the election results and secondly, in the political center shifting to the right on issues like climate and migration, we see what a vast playing field opens up for the Americans. For so many forces in Europe, such a proposition will be very, very, very tempting. And now it's worth noting that very little is needed to achieve success, because in practice, very little is needed to the European political system. That is, it wouldn't take much to create the impression that the European Union is an organization incapable of making appropriate decisions quickly enough. And such an impression, if it grows stronger over time, will only reinforce anti-European sentiment. And what could all this lead to? What might the consequences be? What might the effects of American actions be? The collapse of the European Union doesn't have to mean institutions being dissolved, the European Parliament completely disbanding, or someone standing up and shouting a banner. Absolutely not. The collapse of the European Union could mean a decline in the importance of the central level of European policy, and that might be...
Yeah, there's pretty much letting countries self-govern again. Because they already are, but when they're dealing... It's like, that's what I'm saying, like, if you really think about the European Union in a lot of ways, it's the United States, right? A bunch of states all listening to one federal group in Brussels, in this case Brussels, and for example the United States, Washington D.C. So in a lot of ways it is similar. Like, states, they have, like, they act very individually. They have their own laws, their own policy, their own their own government, state government, local government. So yeah, in a lot of ways the European Union is just looser United States. Like, obviously we're connected all via the Constitution. They got their own Constitution to an extent, but it's not like, we have it where it's like any state that leaves, it's like every other state has to declare war on you. You know what I mean? So states can't just up and leave the United States without a bunch of problems.
Enough in many respects. This will take place in two fundamental aspects. First, the Americans will want to extract individual aspects of political action, whether trade, military, or technological policy, from relations with the European Union to bilateral relations, as they explicitly state in their strategy. They will tempt individual states. Enter into partnership with us, but enter into partnership with us without all of them there. Secondly, this will also involve the growing role of regional, targeted formats of European regional cooperation, which will be formed around specific goals and a specific community of interests in the face of, or in response to, the inability to make decisions at the central level. And we should assume that the Americans will be the catalyst for both. This means that the Americans will support bilateral partnerships. They will want to draw particular aspects of policy into bilateral relations. And I would also expect them to support regional formats that will emerge in response to this entire phenomenon.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at what we're doing in South America. Like, we're going after a lot of those countries and we're saying, hey, you got to elect conservative governments. Argentina did it. I believe Chile just did it. We want them to elect governments that do align with our ideology. He's not wrong there. we're already seeing it in Europe. We're very much heavily interested, and we were big fans of what the Italian Prime Minister and she's doing over there. We've talked with the AFD party in Germany. We've had conversations with the French party, the conservative ones, and obviously Nigel Farage in Reform UK is a big fan of Donald Trump's. So yeah, he's right there. We're going to see pretty much a lot of these political governments. Part of their angle is that maybe they can, hey, we'll work good with the United States. We'll be. I can see their governments and their political system having to shift towards that way. I do agree with that.
I already mentioned in the article that these American actions are already effective, because perhaps some of you would expect the response of European elites to be to think, well, how can Europe react to such actions aimed at fragmenting European unity? But Europe's action, or rather, its reaction, is quite the opposite. In other words, we are witnessing a race to see who can fight faster to become the preferred American partner.
Yeah, and that's how the tariff
And
war
no
is
one
going.
did it in such an ostentatious, obvious way as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who said that America first is fine, but America can't be alone. And if Europe can't be America's partner, then let Germany be. And
Fair
such
enough.
statements, such signals that we want to be Europe's preferred partner. Excuse me, the United States, of course, outnumber many others, and Poland is also participating in this race, sending these kinds of messages, so we can see that this
so is
strategy
Italy.
is already proving effective in some respects.
You get it.
And
I think Trump said early on, whoever gets the quickest deal with the United States gets a better deal. And remember he was saying, you don't want to be the last country to work a deal with us. I don't know how that ended up going, but
finally, a very, very important point for me, because much of the discussion on this topic comes down to assessing whether it's good or bad for us, whether the American strategy is good for us or not. And here we can break lances, we can have beautiful intellectual debates. But for me, this discussion is boring, secondary, absolutely secondary, because whether we like the American strategy or not is absolutely secondary to its being what it is. The most important question we should be asking ourselves is how it can harm us, how we can benefit from it.
it's happening either way. I think that's kind of what he's saying. Like, regardless if Europe likes it or not, this is what the current agenda is. So how are you guys going to respond to it? It's a good question.
To reach such conclusions, we must first try to understand the reasoning behind the American security strategy and what American policy towards Europe will look like. When we observe these trends, we will be able to seek solutions to insulate ourselves from the effects of this strategy and how we can potentially benefit from it, because America needs Europe to implement its global policy.
That's true.
Yes,
do help us.
America needs Europe, but America does not need the European Union. America does not need Europe as a unit.
He's right there.
Europe as a unit may be disadvantageous from the United States' perspective in terms of seeking a balance of power. Europe as a unit is problematic when it comes to trade relations. Europe as a unit is not aligned with America today on many ideological and political issues, and Europe as a unit has the ability to regulate what Americans would not want us to regulate. And from these perspectives, and perhaps many others, Americans may want to attack European integration decisively. Thanks for your attention, and see you soon. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of fair points he brought up here, to be honest with you. I do think some of his criticisms of what we're doing in America, that's fair. And it's always interesting to hear another perspective on this, right? Like, it's kind of like I guess some ways his video is more of like me responding and talking about some of what he's saying, right? So in a way, this is like a conversation, right? From two different parts of the world. And there's a lot of truths that he was saying, and how America, I think he's very right in the sense that we don't technically need the European Union, but we can have the UK, Germany, France, Italy, Ukraine, right? Because that's what we're invested with. We can have relations and we can have trade with all those countries and be successful. We don't need to have the whole European Union telling us what to do, and that's also very true. I do believe that he didn't really get too deep in on it, but yeah, the main issue I do think, or one of the main issues, is the fact that we're seeing a population replacement, and the fact that the European Union is doing nothing about that. That's one of the biggest things that we see, especially for a lot of recent, immigrants who've come over from these countries, and they're Americans now. They're living in America, and they're seeing that their home countries are totally turning to shit. No one could have ever predicted that. No one could ever have predicted what modern day immigration would look like. How could you? And yeah, he didn't really touch on that too much. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of financial with the corporations. He's 100% right on. Corporations don't want to be regulated by the European Union, and that's where I do like some of what the European Union's done there. Like I said, specifically on their consumer protections. Like the only reason why we had the whole iPhone cord mess cleared up was because of the European Union saying, "Hey, you got to have one cord. Enough of the thousands of cords." Like they do that type of shit so good. They really are. They're ahead of us in a lot of areas there. Part of that's because of how our lobbying is here. And I don't know how if the European Union's lobbying works and stuff. But yeah, no, great video. Great video. I'll definitely link this guy's video alone down below. But it's really cool that they're doing this auto dub stuff so you can kind of watch these videos. Without this, I probably never would have watched it. So yeah, interesting video. Drop a like on this. Definitely he did good content. So alright guys, if you guys like this video and you want to see more of these types of videos, let me know. And just overall, let me know your guys' thoughts about this guy. Or not him specifically, or about what he said, right? Let me know what your thoughts about this. Because I think it's just a really interesting topic and conversation. So, alright guys, appreciate the time. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the video, help grow this channel, help grow good conversation. So, alright, have a good one. Appreciate it.